Okay, welcome everyone to the Conscious Movie of the Month gathering. I'm Trina Wyatt, founder and CEO of Conscious Good, and I'm thrilled to be hosting with Allan Kaplan, the founder of the Integral Cinema Project, and his comrade in arms. I shouldn't say that really, should I, Jonathan? But and Jonathan here.
Director of Communications.
There we go. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you both. And this month we're going to be talking about the film Black Panther. Really excited to discuss this film. So thank you for joining us, Mark.
I just wanted to start with a brief introduction of why we're doing the Black Panther, why we're doing Black Panther this month. First of all, it's a great example coming off of last month. We talked about Game of Thrones and how Game of Thrones was targeting a specific structure of consciousness, which was the mythic structure, and its shift from mythic to rational, or from feudal empires to nation states. But Black Panther, it's a very special film in that it uses the mythic story structure as its simple foundation, and it then packs inside of it, under the surface, a rainbow of evolutionary processes that touches on multiple stages. And it also does something very rare, which is it shows characters making the transition between stages quite explicitly, which is, as I said, very rare. So those are the two things, and in terms of that kind of thing. But in addition, it is a great teaching tool for all of us conscious medium makers, because it has a very simple story on the surface and very complex streams under the surface. So it's an incredibly complex work that is actually quite simple on the surface. So it is kind of like a Trojan horse, where anybody could enjoy this film, anyone could access this film at any stage and get seeds of other stages and other ways of being, and of examples of pathological versus healthy examples of stages and the transitions between stages. So it's a kind of a beautiful, subtle teaching tool for us. And it also is a great example of how you can create a work that can reach a lot of people and try to target a lot of shifts at different populations. And that has had a profound effect. It was huge at the box office. And according to many African American writers and reporters, that it had a huge impact on the African American culture in the United States. So it's had a deep cultural impact, and it's connected with a lot of people, and we don't know its full impact beyond that. So it's a great example of how you could create a consciousness-raising work in sheep's clothing. So that's kind of a basic overview, and also we wanted to talk real briefly about how it does this. And the key to this which we're talking about right now in our course on the Campus Co-Evolved sister platform for us. And we're talking about how does a master filmmaker or a master artist do what they do? How do you create a masterwork, something that's masterful? Well, we know mastery includes mastery of the craft, and that could be taught and learned. And most film schools, that's what they teach, and most film courses, that's what they teach, because that's the teachable part. You can't teach talent, we all know that, but you can nurture it, and you could learn how to optimize your expression of your talents. But then there's something we don't usually talk about, and that is how a master perceives self, others, and the world, because that is one of the foundations of what makes somebody a master. In art and film, and I mean moving image-based media, the master tends to be able to show us things we've never seen before, to wake up to levels we have not touched before. And the way they do that is they can see more. Their perspectival field is different. And in our research, we found that a lot of the masters are actually operating at what we call the integral structure. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, the integral structure is a stage of development. If you're familiar with the idea of pre-modern, modern, and postmodern societies and art and all that, this would be meta-modern, which is past postmodern. And what it is it's the structure of consciousness where we try to look at the big picture. We try to unpack every situation in as many from as many different angles as we can, and seek the interconnections. So it's a way of looking at ourselves, the world, and others that gives us this wider and deeper perspective. And it gives us the perspective to be able to see all the other stages, where prior to the integral stage, it doesn't. So what we've done, well, what integral theory has done is try to map how the integral stage of development works. All right. So what we've been doing at the Integral Cinema Project is mapping how the integral structure and the other structures are reflected in the moving image. So what we've been doing is mapping how the integral structure and the other stages are reflected in the moving image. And one of our discoveries was that master filmmakers appear to be operating, many of them, at the integral structure, even if they're making films that are operating at the other levels. So it appears that we have the tools now to train us to perceive more like a master. So when we look at Black Panther, we could start unpacking how he's doing it because we have these maps, because we could see how he's creating four-dimensional characters. Yeah, that's four and not three. because it's actually four. Even Stanislavski in his work is exploring four dimensions of character. There's four levels of story, which is the textual level, then there's the subtextual level, which is the unconscious undercurrents, the backstory of the characters, their words, their all the underneath psychological, emotional currents. Then there is the metatextual, which is the themes, the ideas that are being communicated. And then there's the transtextual, which is archetypes, symbols, metaphors that are being communicated. And understanding that gives us a key into how Black Panther is burying all of that complexity. They're taking that surface text and they're synchronizing everything that's happening in all four levels of story. So they're communicating across all four levels all the time. And that makes it this layered experience. And they're not just communicating across these four levels simultaneously, they're doing so in the four dimensions of story, image, sound, and time, or the movement of everything through time. So you can see how exponentially it's expanding the communication capacity of the creator if we're able to perceive in this way. And many media makers are perceiving this way naturally, but we could teach people and you could learn how to do it yourself by kind of retraining your way of looking at films and life. So that's kind of the basic intro. Now I want to open it up. Maybe even start with Jonathan, who throw in your 2 cents here, Jonathan, because you were a major code researcher on this film.
Yep. Well, I mean, I don't know if you've all seen our podcast series on Black Panther, but we kind of took a deep dive, and Mark was mentioning how I was just blown away by so many different domains of this film. Just the fact that it depicted Black excellence across all domains is something I've never seen in any other Hollywood film, because Hollywood films very seldom have any Black representation, let alone superiority. In a way, it's a Black supremacist film, not in a negative way, but just in the way that this African country that was never colonized by any kind of European settlers, so they're actually a pure African country, and they're superior. They have superior technologies. They're more integral the way they operate. They know multiple languages. So it's Black superiority, which is something that I think a lot of white viewers didn't know what they were seeing. They didn't realize how radical that was and how subversive that was. So for me, this film was extremely subversive. The fact that they got it made is amazing. And it just is very casual about the fact that they're superior. You know, they go to Korea and they all speak Korean. You know, his girlfriend speaks Korean explicitly, but then later he says, "What are you talking about with this?" So it's implied that he also speaks Korean. So they seem to be superhuman in that way, you know, as far as how they function. They're high functioning. So, and then as Mark said, you see male and female characters. The major female characters around the king represent the structures of consciousness in their healthy stages, from mythic to rational to pluralistic. And the major male characters around him represent them in their pathological stages. So you have a pathological mythic character who you actually do see in the film transition to rational. Two of them, actually. There are two mythic characters who transition to rational. There's a rational character, the CIA agent, who has a pathology. He can't see that America actually is hegemonic and likes to take over countries and disrupt countries and destabilize them. And he just kind of says this without really thinking about it. And all the other characters are like looking around like, ooh, what kind of psychopath is this? And he can't see it. And he gets snapped out of that. And then you have a pluralistic character, which is the main villain, Killmonger, who wants to save all oppressed people. So he has a global view, but it's a pathological global view from his upbringing. And so he also transitions. And then you have the king, who's kind of an immature character who becomes a mature integral king and is able to see all the big picture kind of. So it's just amazing that it put all of this in it. It also is, as I mentioned, it's because they're not an American country. It's able to actually look at America from the outside and comment on American hegemony and American empire in kind of a very subtle way. So you have that one. I can't remember. So there's so many different things that are in this. And of course, just issues of slavery, issues of race, issues of class. So one of the earliest scenes is a scene of black people enslaving other black people. So it's able to look at the issue of kidnapping and slavery separate from the racial issue, because obviously it's also a economic issue ultimately. And it even has some of the characters who are the slavers are actually also kidnapped and forced to be in the army. So it's just very subtly unpacking economic systems as well. Again, in the context of a Marvel superhero film. And I saw it with a lot of people who didn't see any of that, but it's all in there. So really a very profound work.
So can I jump in? I feel like you both are the advanced Ph.D. course in Black Panther consciousness raising. So I have some really basic questions. One, do you guys know how close, I mean, was there an actual Marvel comic Black Panther that this was based upon? So,
Yes.
so this originally was written by Stan Lee, or
Who
was the original creator?
The original creator, I believe, was Stan Lee, and I believe it actually predates the Black Panther Party. I believe the Black Panther Party then named themselves partly after this. It was this black superhero character. But then the comic got rewritten about 5 years ago or so, and Ta-Nehisi Coates was the writer, who's a very famous black intellectual writer. He wrote The Case for Reparations in The Atlantic, which kind of reopened the whole discussion of reparations. And that article really unpacked the whole history of white supremacy and what he calls white plunder from the black community in America, because it didn't end with slavery. It continued all the way on to the present day, and definitely even within the legal structure, it continued into the 1960s. So Ta-Nehisi Coates is a major black writer and intellectual in America now, and he actually wrote the whole new Black Panther series. And I think that's what this is based on as well.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. And then I would love, you know how Mark, you and I talked about Avatar and how Avatar incorporated the different stages and the characters. I would love if we could even just take, you know, like 3 characters, or, you know, the king, 1 character, and talk about, you know, from the character standpoint, just that the real basics of what you talked about in broad strokes, and the pathology of some who are at different stages. If we could just like kind of do a deep dive maybe onto one or 2 of the main characters.
That's a great idea. Really good idea. All right. Well, probably I'm feeling called to start with the king, with Black Panther, because it's a very unique character in that he is kind of lost in the evolutionary spectrum. He's got a little bit of everything, and he's not like solidified in where he's at. So he's like almost in a transition phase where we find him at the beginning.
Right, and it was really interesting how his friend said, did you freeze when you saw her? it was like he was emotional. He was. I thought that was a really interesting way to introduce him to the story, right?
Yeah.
That's his sister who says that afterwards.
Yeah.
Kind of
And what's
busting his
interesting
balls.
is his society is a integration of magic, mythic, rational, and pluralistic. Even if you look at the architecture, when they show you the main city, right? You've got like tribal architecture with mythic architecture, with steel and glass, and with modern and postmodern architecture, all kind of wrapped together. And in a way, it's almost like and so he is like bouncing between the stages. And that's why he's got on either side of him a pathological and a healthy version of each stage he's struggling with. And the characters around him are creating this angel and devil on my shoulder dynamic for the main character. So he's kind of experiencing these interplays with these different levels.
Now,
and he ends up being able to integrate them.
Yes. Can you specify who the character that's the angel? Because there's a couple that come to mind as possibilities.
All the major female characters around him, from the warrior general, who is the healthy version of that structure. I mean, she has the warrior energy, but she also will hold at the warrior position for love, for communion. You know, I mean, she cares about others. They've seen when they free the slaves in Africa. You know, I mean, she kind of connects with them on an emotional level after she makes sure they're safe. So, you know, and she's meditating. So she's the meditation warrior. So she's a healthy warrior version of the magic mythic. While his childhood friend who runs the border tribe, he's pretty much stuck in the magic mythic traditional, some of the pathology. He can't see past some of it. Right. So he's got those two on either side of him as these examples.
And we'll note that the border tribe is, of course, the ultimate mythic tribe because it's us versus them. It's the border, literally. So he's the one who's arguing against immigration. He says we can't let them in because they'll ruin our way of life. So he's actually representing a mythic structure that's quite present in all around the world right now. You know, that can't let the immigrants in because they're going to ruin our way of life. Another key with him is that he has those scars on his face, which you don't really notice until you see Killmonger later, who says, I got one of these scars for every kill. And then you realize that he and the chief of the tribe are the only other characters in the film who have scars all over their faces, which means that they're also warriors and they fight and kill. So that really gives you a key to what kind of person he is. He has that in common with Killmonger as far as being.
Well, and that's interesting too, because the warrior general doesn't have scars that we see, right?
The warrior general.
The female warrior
general.
Right.
I can't remember her name. Yeah, right. She doesn't have the scars.
Right. There you go. Yeah. So that's, I mean, and she's a great example of the deep feminine. Because she's a warrior, but she doesn't, I mean, she resists killing at all costs unless she has to. And
there's a motherly quality to the way she protects T'Challa, even though he says, no, I can take care of this. Just don't freeze when you see her. She says, don't be ridiculous. And of course, he freezes and she has to rescue him. And she just, the way she does it is very like, of course, you know, like, yeah, of course he's a kid. I got to protect him, you know. So there's even a quality of that, you know.
Yeah. And then, of course, his sister is the rational, the healthy rational. She's a scientist, but she's not like, you know, in comparison, the CIA agent is the pathological rational, where they're seeing everything as, you know, as it, does this situation affect our country's bottom line? You know, so they're kind of, you know, so they're, you know, so you've got the pathological and healthy version of the rational industrial system that he's got the two examples of. And then pluralistic, you have his girlfriend who is that pluralistic in helping others as the healthy version. And then there's the unhealthy version, which is Killmonger, who wants to free all oppressed people by oppressing the oppressors. So he becomes what he hates. So there you have the polarities. So it's an interesting kind of character structure. So he becomes like the learning vehicle for me, the audience. Because as king, he ends up being able to integrate all the structures. And when he visits his father and his father and his father, you know, all the kings in the other world, at the end, he's able to say, no, the way you've been doing it is wrong. I have to go back. I have to fix this. You don't see what's going on here. You don't see a bigger picture here. But there's a bigger picture you're not seeing. So he
That was a
able
beautiful part. I love that part in the film because it's like the power to tell a parent, no, you know, that realization and the power to tell a parent and then to be able to act on it. It's very powerful.
He's able to see the pathology of his society. Actually, they have a mythic pathology of we have to protect our way of life, and that's why we're so advanced. And there's a lot of supposedly pluralistic people in major pluralistic societies who have that same thing. Well, we love everyone, so therefore we can't let in anyone who doesn't love everyone because that'll ruin our way of life of loving everyone. But now you're actually putting up that wall. It's you're setting up an us them. So
that's a great point. Really great point.
In fact, even Killmonger points that out when he has his psychedelic journey, which is probably an ibogaine journey, I would say, because he talks to his father, and his father says, "I think they'll say we're lost," and he said, and Killmonger says, "Maybe they're the ones who are lost because they've lost their connection to their own people in a way by closing their borders."
Which is, in essence, is true. So, I mean, he does see some truth. It's just he's let that hurt and pain and wounding overtake him and drive him, you know, over the edge.
One of the parts that I love, one of the elements of this film that I loved was the respect for the different tribes, the different their way of living. You know, it was like the king's tribe was highly advanced and technical, but there were other tribes that were obviously more attached to the land and to a different way of life. And yet there was this, you know, all seen as equal, all, you know, having a voice and ability to come forward to take the, you know, leadership.
They actually designed that. There are 4 tribes, I guess. There's the river tribe, which is where her girlfriend is from, which is all kind of green outfits they're wearing and some sort of a more feminine principle. I think water in general is generally a feminine principle, certainly in other tribes. And then there's the merchant tribe, which is sort of in earth tones. And then there's the border tribe, and then I guess he's the Panther tribe. But so each of those sort of has a resonance of its own, I think. They kind
And
of
then there's the mountain tribe.
And then there's the mountain tribe, which is sort of on its own and comes down from the mountain. And that's another mythic character who evolves. He manages to, it's a fight to the death at the beginning, which is actually sort of a magic mythic kind of all that tribalism with the drums. And the guy, it should be a fight to the death, but he convinces him to tap out. He says, you fought with honor and your people need you. As Mark says, that's using the language of the mythic structure to communicate a rational idea. You fought with honor, which is a mythic idea, and your people need you. So he taps out and is able to go. And then later on, he does transition to rational and decides to help them because he can see that there's a bigger picture than just his own tribe, the interest of his tribe, which would be the mythic interest. So it's perfectly done in the film. You know, it's just laid out for you to see.
Yeah, that is really kind of a great example of what we're talking about, which how you could actually show a very complex process in a simple way. So there you have this mythic fight, this magic mythic fight for who will be king. And this moment where the mythic warrior is losing, but the rational and pluralistic king like speaks to him in his own language to try to convince him, you know. And so in a way it's like it's not a manipulation. It's really just how can I communicate to him this truth? So he's communicating, number one, you have fought with honor. So he was recognizing him, you know, as the, and like Jonathan said, that is very mythic. To fight and with honor is a big thing, and to die with honor. And so he acknowledges that. But then he kind of even, he takes the rational idea of, but without you, your tribe will be lost. At this point in our history, we need you rationally, you know, I mean, just from the bigger picture. So, and he says it though in a mythic form, like Jonathan was saying. And that mythic form is, I just want to unpack it a little bit more because this is a great lesson, is your people need you. He doesn't kind of say it as, given our situation and everything that's happening, I mean, he doesn't express it in a logical structure. The mythic phrasing is, your people need you. A rational expression of that same thing would have been, you know, it's, you know, with what's happening and the situation in your tribe, the situation outside of the tribe, with the whole community and with the world, it's like we kind of really need you right now. You can't really tap out, you know. But that is logic-based, and that wouldn't reach him. So just simplifying it into his language, your people need you, that's what could hit him. And it's the same thing, it's just phrased in his language. So that's kind of a key lesson that we could learn here with Black Panther.
In fact, the same thing happens with Shuri, his sister. Early on, when she says, "Look, give me your kimoyo beads, I can improve them." He says, "Oh, they worked fine." And she says, "Brother, just because something works doesn't mean it can't be made better," which is a rational scientific idea. And then later, when Agent Ross wakes up in her lab and she says, "Don't scare me like that colonizer," which is kind of funny because she's in the upper hand, but she's still calling him what he is, you know, but she's got the upper hand. And then he says, I don't think so. Bullet wounds don't heal overnight by magic. And she said, they do here. And she kind of laughs at him, but not by magic, by technology. Like she's almost ridiculing him for being so primitive. She says, not by magic, by technology, you know. So she's pushing that rational lesson on him and helping to snap him out of his pathology. Oh, maybe we're not the greatest thing in the world. There's something that's just a whole other level beyond us, you know, and that helps pop him out of that. In a way, to connect, to realize that, oh, they're not a poor country, which they've been taught to think that they are, but they're actually maybe more advanced. So maybe you can have a global view. And then later on, he does actually help them to get the weapons back. Even though he wants them for the US, he realizes that Killmonger is more of a danger to the world, and he helps get them back. So he has that lesson, but Shuri gives him that lesson pretty firmly, I think.
Yeah. So you can see how the structures are embedded in character, in the dialogue, you know, in the set design and the visuals. You know, it's woven in. And you know, when we think of great filmmakers like Kubrick or Hitchcock or Spielberg or Fellini or Bergman, these are all people who have a wider perspectival field. They're able to communicate and orchestrate these multiple levels because they practice looking at life that way. And so if you start looking, you know, for these layers, it becomes very easy for you. And you just see them everywhere, and then you can't stop seeing them. And Jonathan will attest to this is work infected him quite early, and he couldn't. So, but that, you know, it's like one of the things that's blown me away recently is how the brain evolves constantly. Every habit we repeat over and over again, every thought we repeat over again, actually lays down new neural pathways in our brain. And when we repeat an idea or a habit or a way of being for anywhere from 20 to 60 days, I think the sweet spot is somewhere in the 40s, our brain actually creates a superhighway for that idea, for that perception, for that habit, so that it becomes easier and natural. So it's really, we're constantly reprogramming our minds all the time by what we focus on. So we could actually choose to start reprogramming ourselves to look at all these multiple ways. And as we do, the complexity actually becomes easy to see. And it's like, it's no longer complex because we have the neural pathways that have built us this platform where we can easily access that information quickly. And that creates this different way of perceiving that is greater depth and span. So that is kind of fundamental. And, you know, I mean, I don't know if the filmmakers of this work have studied integral theory or not, because that doesn't matter, because integral theory is just a mapping of a naturally occurring stage of development. So that's kind of really our teaching for you each month as we're talking about films and talking about these patterns. That's part of this reprogramming. So if you watch these every month, you know, this will help you in your programming. You know, we have a course that we're doing right now at Campus Co-Evolve, and we have one coming up here at Conscious Good, and perhaps even a few more. So, and we have resources that you could go to help yourself upgrade your consciousness to be able to see these complexities easily and simply.
I can unpack one more scene just to kind of illuminate this. We talked also about the 4 quadrants. I'm not sure how much you talked about them here, but you sort of talked about how there's the individual interior and the individual exterior and the collective interior and collective exterior. But the scene where we first meet Killmonger in the museum seemed to have lost everybody's audio feed, visual. Well, I think they're still there, hopefully. So the scene where we first meet Killmonger on the superficial level is just a guy getting a tour, and then it turns out that he's participating. Oh, there we go. It turns out he's participating in a robbery, but that scene is also unpacking sort of the history of white supremacy. Hello. Sort of the history of white supremacy is being unpacked in that. Oh, there you go. Hi, kids. So because he actually is talking about how these items in the museum were stolen from Black cultures all around the world. And then he also brings it to the personal. So he says, you've been following me since I first came in here, but you haven't looked at what I put in your coffee. But the first part of that phrase is really unpacking the immediate effect of white supremacy on him as someone who everywhere he goes, he's followed because of his Black skin. And there's even a hint of its effect on his consciousness, the anger and the sort of rage and that sort of buried rage underneath. So you're feeling that upper right quadrant, which is the interior individual quadrant, and the upper left, which is how it's affecting him in the world and how he interacts in the world. And the systems quadrant, because the museum system and the way systems oppress Black people, and the cultural quadrant, because it's all in the culture. Even the art museum is part of the culture as well. So all of that is in there in what seems like a simple scene. And there's a trope of the angry Black man, which is actually undermined later on because you think that he's just the sidekick to the main villain. So he's the angry Black sidekick, which is sort of a trope. And then halfway through the film, there's a détournement, and you find out, no, actually, it's not that at all. He's the guy who's running everything. And Claw, the villain, is actually a patsy. So when you watch the film the second time, it's a completely different scene when you realize that how he's operating, he's actually a CIA agent who's not even really a CIA agent. He's actually a triple agent. You know, he's actually a Wakandan rebel who's trying to take over, pretending to be a CIA agent, pretending to be a thief. You know? So it's a 3-dimensional chess. So all of that is in that scene, no matter how much you see it, but the more you watch and unpack it, the more you see how rich that is, that communication, and how much it's telling about colonialism, white supremacy, and that whole history in the context of this simple scene on all these different layers.
Oh, it's so great. So
every scene is like that in the film.
Every scene. So
just about every scene has multiple layers of meaning.
I asked my son Trust and his friend Keegan if they've saw Black Panther, and I thought it would be great to hear from them what they liked about the film. What did you like, Keegan?
I liked when when they joined with the other clan.
The Mountain Hill tribe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked when they joined because it just made it more interesting because they were enemies in the first place, but then they joined, which was really cool. I like how it has like a lot of good action, and some parts bring a lot of suspense, so it's a good movie. And I think there are some really interesting parts that are totally like, it's this kind of almost like a made up culture, but there's a lot of cool stuff involving like their traditions, and I thought that was really cool because it was completely made up. So
yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, guys.
Beautiful. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah, I actually grew up in Africa. I spent 5 years in Africa as a kid, so there's a lot of African culture in here that I've never seen in the film either, a Hollywood film. And just the fact that the throne room in this beautiful modern room has that red mud floor, which is that red mud that you see all over. I lived in Nigeria for 3 years, and all the villages have that kind of mud. They have mud huts and mud, that red mud, that particular clay color. So they did a lot of that integration of that really tribal living situations, even with modern architecture. So just a
The
lot
other
of things.
the other thing was with the tribe, that where they had the plate in the lips. I was telling my son that's actually, there are tribes that do that, right? Current day tribes that have that. Okay, which
Yeah, I
was
don't know if they still
fascinating.
do today. But I think watching that, and I thought that one of them, the plates seemed to have electronics in it. And I don't know if that's real or not, or if that's just my perception, but it almost looked like that plate was some kind of high tech
I think so. Yeah.
motherboard plate, I think, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Talking about integrating tribal and, pluralistic.
And I think what the boys said was actually beautiful, because they pointed out two integrative processes in the film. One of them being the coming together of the tribes, integrating the tribes, coming together to fight a common enemy or a common threat. And so the coolness of that integration. And then the other form of integration is of the society itself. When I believe it's your son who is saying that.
Yeah, my
cool
son was
that
Trust. Yeah, the second speaker. Yeah.
That their society was all
Made up.
kind of made up,
Uh-huh.
because what he was seeing was this hybrid of all the structures of consciousness integrated into a whole new society.
Yes.
So the fact that they were picking that up and thinking that's cool,
Yes. They were both
talks about its power, actually.
Yes,
You know?
that's what I thought would be really interesting, because we don't have many films where we talk about the stages of consciousness that my 10-year-old is excited to watch with me. So we had a really good time watching that. I think it was his 5th time, and I had watched part of it with him before, but I watched it from start to finish last week. And I just think it points to what you said at the beginning, the genius of this film, and anybody at any stage can enjoy something about this story,
I've actually met quite a few people who say it's their kid's favorite film, or their kids just love it and watch it over and over again. And I love that, because I say, for me, there were things on the 3rd, 4th, 5th time I was still seeing things. I mean, now I've seen it a lot. I think I might have discovered most of its secrets, but I've watched it a lot of times, and every time there's something new, some new trope that I realize, like even just the way the film opens with these guys plotting a robbery, and it looks like a typical, because they're black guys in Oakland plotting a robbery with guns and stuff, and then you find out much later that actually they're freedom fighters for their people in a way, or they perceive themselves that way. So they're more like revolutionaries than thieves, but it just seems like a police procedural kind of trope,
Yeah, so many nice little twists like that.
It unwinds the white supremacist, the white savior trope is unwound
Yes.
a couple times as well, but given to a black character.
Yes. So we have another 10 minutes, and I thought it would be great to open it up for other people to talk or ask questions. So I'm going to basically unmute all and see if we can't get some more participation.
Does anybody have a question?
Thanks for joining, Andre, Alberto, Lisa. Appreciate
Lisa and
you
Alberto,
being here.
you're still muted. You might have to unmute yourselves.
Oh, well, that was weird. I thought I unmuted everyone.
You did, but mine also said that I needed to unmute myself.
Oh, there we go.
What do you think, Alberto? Do you have any comments? Oh, someone's at my door, I think.
I'm here as a
Maybe not.
listener.
Let me see.
Well, it's impressive to just I can listen to you guys talking about this movie or I think any other movie for ages. I mean, I'm just a total newbie in this world, so I'm just here to absorb. So really, really impressive.
Did you see the film? What did you like about it?
Well, actually, to be honest, I just saw a portion of the movie when it came out because animation was not my really favorite. And we are now with the squadra, with which we have joined the course with Mark and Jonathan. We are supposed to watch the movie Friday because we are screening it. We will be screening in a big screen, but it was not available before Friday. So.
Oh.
It's not an animated film. You said animation?
Well, to me, I mean, in my mind, even if I see it with, and I recognize you were, when you're talking about Nigeria, and I was listening to the podcast, by the way, I have been for 3 months in Nigeria when I was a kid myself. So
nice.
Even if it's with actors, but Marvel, in my mind, for some reason, it was, well, that's kind of superhero.
Comic book, yes.
Not my style, but now I'm kind of seeing it from a completely different perspective.
It's a Trojan horse, as Mark said. It's using a Marvel film to communicate ideas to a mass audience.
Yes,
and so it has to start mythic and then move out, you know.
And since I see the purpose of that, that's why now I really want to see it completely.
Yes.
At least
that brings
twice.
up a great point too, in that if we want to reach a lot of people, one of the fundamental ways to do that is have a mythic story structure, because the mythic stage is one of the most developed stages that we have, because it was in power for a couple thousand years. Whereas the rational industrial stage is only a few hundred years old.
Yeah.
And the information age is only less than 100 years old. But if you go for the mythic story and then use that as like the carrier wave, you can communicate with a lot of people. Because even people at rational or pluralistic or even integral, we still have an affinity for the hero's journey. It's baked into our DNA.
Yes, I can see that.
And everybody, it connects with everybody.
Yeah.
On some level. So if you kind of understand that, then you could use it in a way that integrates all the other stages, but helps you to meet people where they are at first. And in the modern world right now, you have basically mythic, rational, pluralistic with some integral as kind of the major structures. So if you have a foundation in the mythic and then elements in the others, you'll be able to reach a broader audience, if that's your purpose. If your purpose is to target a specific group, then you don't have to worry about it.
No, we need to worry about it. And by the way, the guy of the squad, they have already seen the movie more than once, so I'm just the one who is the behind, but I will catch up for sure.
Well, it's definitely a movie that's a completely different film the second time you watch it because of all the things that you now know, and you see everything is on a different level, and at least the second time.
Yeah.
It's almost like spoiler alerts if you tell someone what happens the second time they watch it. You know, all the things you notice. Whoa.
And once again, this is a great example of what is the effect of a master creator. We've known for many years, and many critics have talked about it, when a work is created by what we consider a master, you could see it over and over again and see something new every time. That's one of the hallmarks of mastery.
That's a great definition. Great point.
Complexity.
Every master's work, there's always, you peel away the onion skin, there's always something even further under. And that's kind of the key to mastery.
So any other questions or comments from our community? By the way, I just saw Harriet this last weekend in the theaters, and I posted about it on Instagram, and somebody said, what do you think about the casting controversy? And I don't know if you guys are familiar with, I wasn't, so I had to look at it and kind of get up to speed. But I really enjoyed that film and just thought it was beautifully done on so many levels. So maybe next year when it's streaming, it'll be one of our films that we discuss. But there was the controversy was that the actress who plays Harriet Tubman is actually British and came from an African nation that didn't experience slavery. So it was like, wow, you have all of these talented African American actresses, and yet, you cast this very important historic role with, someone who's not African American and hasn't gone through that history.
I wonder where she came from. I didn't know there was.
She's an incredible actress, and she has won awards for I think on the stage. I got a leaf blower. I'm going to mute myself.
We've come full circle.
It's leaf blower day. It's so bizarre. I hate those things. So it is 2 o'clock, unless we had more to add there. Well, great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mark and Jonathan and all of our guests today for participating in this incredible discussion about Black Panther.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Night. That's awesome.